On today's show, taking a look at some of the best available remaining free agents the Sixers can sign to the vet mint. Still some decently talented players out there that I think will end up finding their ways onto an NBA roster. Could that be on a Philadelphia's roster? We shall see. Now, talking about this Sixers roster, the way it stands right now, 14 of the 15 slots are filled. Of course, waiting still for Quentin Grimes to sign that contract. When it does happen, I do expect Andre Drummond to be moved, which would open up a roster spot once again. The Sixers could then sign one of these minimum free agents. Of course, Tyrese Maxey, Kyle Lowry, Jared McCain, BJ Edgecombe, Eric Gordon. It's a pretty stacked guard room right now for Philadelphia, and imagine Grimes will slot in there. So I think the Sixers more looking at that forward/center position, especially if they do move on from Andre Drummond. They did, of course, bring in Janai Broom. They signed Trendon Watford. You have Adem Bona, but with Embiid on there, you'd always like to see some more depth, especially, again, if you move on from the big fella in Andre Drummond. Sixers two-way spots are also all filled, all three of those as well. Dominic Barlow recently signed, taking up one of those, Hunter Salas and Jabari Walker. I do expect at least two, if not all three, of these players to get some run for the Sixers during the regular season, especially Barlow and Walker being those big forwards at a position of need for Philadelphia with their skill sets could help the Sixers in an area where they're pretty lacking, especially after losing Gershon Yabusele. Now, before we get into the free agents Sixers could sign to the vet min, be honest with me right now, the way the roster is currently constructed, no Quentin Grimes as of this moment, how would you grade this Sixers roster? Give me an A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know how you think Daryl Morey has done in reconstructing this Sixers roster heading in to the 2025-26 NBA season. So let's get started with my free agent targets here. Some of these guys we talked about before, some of them not quite as much. So we'll start with someone who we have talked about quite a little bit on the show, and that's Amir Coffey, the 3-and-D wing from the Clippers. Was pretty reliable for them most of last season, got hurt towards the end of the year, didn't really play a role in the postseason, but look, shot 40% from three last year, can do some interesting things on offense, get to the mid-range. As a 3-and-D wing, you'd like the defense to be a little bit better than it has been, especially as it was this season, but still a decent player that I imagine will find his way on an NBA roster, and at 6'7", 210, with his scoring and three-point shooting ability, I think a role the Sixers could be interested in given the way the roster is currently constructed, again, with all these guards that they have on their roster. Chris Boucher, another name we've talked about quite a bit. Someone who at 6'9", 200 forward/center, probably a little bit more forward than center, but at his size, with his shooting ability, 36% from three, 49% from the field, a little bit bigger, taller at least than someone like Amir Coffey, and longer as well. Certainly an intriguing player on both ends of the floor. Getting up there in age now, 32 years old. But again, at that age, with his skill set, with his size and his length, those two words right there, size and length, are things the Sixers need to add more of on this roster. So I think Boucher would be an interesting option as well. Precious Achiuwa, in that same kind of vein, another player we've talked about quite a bit on the show. A good athlete, but a little bit undersized for that center spot at 6'8", 225. He, to me, is kind of more of a true center, doesn't really space the floor a whole lot, and doesn't offer too much on offense other than being, again, athletic, a decent rebounder, a decent defender, but not going to space the floor, not going to play make at all despite being someone undersized. So a bit of a weird fit, but in a strange way, I think that almost fits in well with the Sixers. Someone who you feel comfortable at the four, feel somewhat comfortable with him at the five, despite the lack of shooting ability at the four, but can give you that hustle, can give you that energy, and give you that rebounding that you really do need. Before the Knicks traded for OG Anunoby back a couple of years ago, he was averaging over 7 rebounds a game for the Knicks, something that the Sixers were awful at last year, the worst rebounding team in the NBA this past season. And I don't think I've quite done enough to address that issue here in this offseason. Now, Trey Lyles certainly won't help too much on the rebounding side of things. 4.5 a game isn't awful at 6'9", 234, but certainly not what he's known for. Really a stretch four, the very prototypical stretch four, going to hit his threes. Now, only shot 34% from three last season. I think he's more around a 37% three-point shooter when he's playing his best basketball. And he's a vet. He's been around for a while. I think the Sixers, again, when you look at the way the roster is constructed, don't have a lot of true fours. Trey Lyles is a true four and a true stretch four, something that they didn't really add this offseason either. Janai Broom, we'll see how the three-point shooting continues to develop. It's been pretty surprisingly good to me in Summer League. Trendon Watford, not much of a three-point shooter, so a different kind of skill set really than we talked about thus far. Not that tall, lanky guy who's going to crash the glass and is athletic and can hit the boards and defend at a high level, but someone who can bring maybe some more offensive firepower and just be that stretch four that the Sixers really have not had, or at least they had in Gershon Yabusele, no longer that he's going to the New York Knicks. Bol Bol, the name that the Sixers fans, at least in the comment section here, really keep talking about, wanting to bring Bol Bol in. Look, I get it. Being 7'2", 220 pounds, of course, Manute Bol played for the Philadelphia 76ers back in the day, and Bol Bol, that same crazy length and height and an interesting skill set, someone who theoretically has been able to shoot the three ball and block shots at the rim, but man, just he's bounced around the NBA really, from Denver to Orlando to Phoenix last season, and hasn't been able to find a home. The idea of Bol Bol to me has always been better than the actual player Bol Bol. I think I'd probably rather just keep Andre Drummond than go Bol Bol. But look, you want to get a little bit younger and get someone who I guess theoretically does have upside, although Bol Bol's been in the league for a minute now. I don't think, if he hasn't reached that potential yet, it's hard pressed for me to think he's going to find it at this point in his career. Still some more names to get to, but before we do, name a free agent you want the Sixers to sign. Or you can tell me that you want them to sign Grimes, and that's it. You don't want to see Andre Drummond leave. But I think a few of you want to see another body brought in here to this roster to compete, especially at that big spot. So get down in the comments section. Give me someone I've named so far. Maybe somebody I haven't named so far. Again, show me you know ball, that you're keeping up with the NBA. Get down in the comment section and let me know. An intriguing option here, both skill set wise and fit wise, is Delano Banton. Now, Banton, 6'9", 204, kind of plays like a point guard, though. Really a true point forward, if you will. Pretty decent numbers for Portland last year. Kind of been developing for a while. Really just needed that three-point shot to come around and just has not been able to get that. But we talk about the Sixers, and a lot of Sixers fans talk about wanting to bring back Ben Simmons, right? And I'll get to Ben Simmons in a second, but Delano Banton, kind of a similar skill set offensively, being a bigger player who can distribute the ball, he can play make, he can find his teammates in the right spot. And with that size and that handle, that offense, man, he can get to the rim a little bit, can get to his shots in the mid-range, a better three-point shooter than Ben Simmons ever has been, but still not very reliable one. Sixers could use some more playmaking on this roster again. You know, Maxey being your true point guard, Kyle Lowry as well. Like, outside of that, you don't have too much playmaking and creating for others. Maybe just give him a shot. See what he can do, bring him in here, and see if that skill set can make a greater impact on the Sixers team than maybe he's been able to make on some of his other squads so far in his NBA career. An interesting center option that I actually am kind of growing on a little bit is Thomas Bryant. I think I'd rather have Thomas Bryant right now than Andre Drummond. Now, Bryant not going to be the rebounder Andre Drummond is, and so from that perspective, maybe you say, I'd rather just keep Andre. But look, Thomas Bryant played some high leverage minutes in some big games for the Pacers on their NBA Finals run this year. Hit some big shots, especially. He can space the floor a little bit. Only 32% in the regular season from three, but in the playoffs, some memorable corner threes in series against teams like the Knicks, and didn't play quite as much against the Thunder, but still showed he can hold his own at least for stretches of time, right? So without Mbona in there, not a floor spacer, bring in someone like Thomas Bryant who's going to play hard and not a great defender, but maybe can hit the occasional timely three. And you know he at least has some experience very recently playing in some pretty big games. Cody Martin, of course, brother of former Sixer Caleb Martin. Very similar players, really. Going to be pretty decent defenders, decent role players coming off the bench. But Cody Martin, an even worse three-point shooter and just a worse offensive player in general than Caleb Martin is. Now, Caleb Martin was pretty bad when the Sixers had him this past season, dealt with some injuries and all that. Of course, traded him for Quentin Grimes. Back end of the rotation guy. I don't think Cody Martin would make quite as much of an impact as some of the other players that we've discussed here on today's list. And then last guy, we're really going to go in depth about here. And look, I didn't want to do this, but I keep seeing the comments, so I've just got to talk about it real quick. The Ben Simmons thing, it's not going to happen. I don't want it to happen. I don't think it should happen. And again, it's just not going to be the case. Sixers fans say that, oh, well, the Sixers could use a player with his height and his skill set, separate the play from the actual player and the history he has with this team. And he can defend well and he can make plays for others. Look, there's a reason the Clippers aren't bringing him back. He got no run in the playoffs for Los Angeles. And Ben, with his injury history, is not the same defender he once was. And look, if he's not making an elite level impact on the defensive end of the floor, I don't think he brings much value as a basketball player anymore. Still, theoretically decent on the fast break and can make some good passes here and there. I'm not signing Ben Simmons just because he can pass better than a lot of the players on this roster. All right, there's other skill sets and other things I'd be concerned about, especially when you go into the history of Ben Simmons with Philadelphia. I don't need to go into all that, so didn't want to spend too much time on that. But the Sixers fans that want to bring Ben Simmons back, I'm just going to be honest. I don't know what you guys are thinking, man. It's not going to happen, and I don't want to see that happen anytime soon. Now, there are a lot of other good guards available. We talked about a lot of forwards and centers here on today's show because I think the Sixers are going to be going after someone at that spot, especially if they move on from Andre Drummond and they bring back Quentin Grimes. They're set at the guard spot 100%. But wanted to show you guys some of the top guards that are available just in case, and, just to get a full landscape of all the free agents that are available. Chris Paul looks like he could be going back to the Clippers. Malcolm Brogdon, still a smart veteran, good defender, good shooter. Russell Westbrook, we'll see where he ends up. Don't need him on the Sixers team. Just inefficient and kind of can shoot you out of games at times if he's playing over his role at this point of his career. Alec Burks, still a good shooter. Gary Payton, kind of just a worse version of Josh Hart, which Josh Hart's a good player. Gary Payton, not quite as much. Seth Curry, obviously former Sixer, but not quite the same player he once was either. Landry Shamet, same can be said for him, although can still shoot it a little bit, was decent at times for the Knicks. Same can be said for Delon Wright as well. Decent at times for the Knicks, but not a whole lot offensively. A decent defender. Corey Joseph, a veteran at this point, has been around the NBA. D'Anthony Melton, another former Sixer who really has been dealing with injuries ever since the end of his time in Philadelphia. Obviously had the back stuff when he was with the Sixers, and then tore his ACL with the Warriors. Still theoretically, good defender, can shoot the three. He was one of my favorite players in the Sixers at one point. But, man, injuries have really ruined what I think could have been a pretty decent career. We'll see. I hope he makes an NBA comeback. Just probably not going to be here with Philadelphia. That'll do it for today's show. If you made it to the end of the video, give me a real one down in the comment section. I'm going to be shouting out all the real ones who did tune in to the entire video. And look, if you're looking for more Sixers coverage, not just here on YouTube, but over on the social media streets as well, give me a follow over on X and Instagram. I'm on X at Jake Chipper, and we have an Instagram account for the channel as well at 76ers Now IG. Post a lot of content here on the main YouTube channel. I'm always talking Sixers as well over on my social media platforms.